Section 56A district includes incumbent State Representative Robert Bierman and candidate Joe Landru. First question is going to be for Representative Robert Bierman. The legislature adjourned in May without passing a significant piece of legislation. The bills included in that legislation included making Social Security benefits tax-free, frontline worker pay expansion, restaurant revitalization funding, renters tax credits, advance refunds, plus the newest issue that's going to be hitting your desk is that currently Minnesota will be taxing student loan forgiveness at the federal level. What can be done to make sure that good legislation like this is passed without being buried in some omnibus bill that doesn't go anywhere?
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you again for the Apple Valley Chamber for holding this event. This is very important for our electorate to be able to see and hear from the candidates. There's a lot of things about this current situation with large omnibus bills that have been going on for quite a long time. I think it's imperative that legislators themselves take up the mantle of deciding what legislation, what package is most important at the start of a session, and working across the aisle to make sure that we bring those things forward and work harder on those things at the front end, and rather than going through the total hearing process on each and every bill and building everything into omnibus bills. That has been something that has been a drag on our success in the 4 years that I've been up there, where we just need to have fewer of those omnibus bills, get to the main issues that we need to address, like some of the ones you noted. But having said that, we did have, at the end of last session, a worked out agreement, floor plan between Republicans and Democrats to utilize that $12 billion, which would have brought to Minnesotans the largest tax break in Minnesota history. We would have had the largest property tax break in Minnesota history. There were very good things, some of which you mentioned in that bill, Social Security being one of them. But that type of a bill, you know, we should be able to work through that instead of having the foot dragging and the lack of people showing up to conference committees to finish work in conference committees. That's been the real drag, and I think we need to have some consequences for legislators who don't show up, who have the gavel and don't call a meeting to continue that work, because ultimately, you know, it is the people's business. We need to finish that business, and we need to do it in an honest and forthright way. We can't say, yes, we're for this package, and then stall out and let the session end listening to political wishes from people who want to create gridlock.
Now, you worked hard from February till May on legislation, and we get to May, and it's the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate who sit down and say, okay, this is the final thing. Why can't we use what has already been discussed along the way, approved along the way, and yet everything got ignored when we got there?
Well, I agree that inability of parties to move forward and agree on things in a way that makes it truly a democratic process where you compromise when you have a lack of an ability to sit down and work out on those issues that are most pertinent. I mean, I'm going back hopefully next year to work on paid family medical leave. That is one of the items that we finally have Republicans who have come to the table and say, yes, indeed, we do need this. That's a popular issue at the door. And, you know, to work on that issue laser focused and get it a floor vote on its own will be one of my biggest goals next session.
Great, thank you. Joe Landru, welcome back.
Yes, sir, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. The state economic outlook for 2023 biennium is showing a $7 billion surplus, $2 billion in reserves. What should be done with these dollars? How do we get them together and work through it in a bipartisan manner?
Thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate it and the invitation. I'll freely admit I'm not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to that kind of money, but I do know that in responding to Representative Bierman here a little bit, my understanding was that there was an agreement at the end of the session, and I believe there's actually an audio recording of the governor calling and stating to kill the deal on the omnibus bill. So that's something that really irked me. I don't know, some news media outlets, I was able to do a little research on that. That's something that I find unacceptable. Our elected leaders are playing games with that. And listening to his response to your questions, I'm glad to admit that we have a few things in common, where I'm not a fan of omnibus bills either. I think that things should be spelled out more directly and broken down. I had the honor and the privilege to be invited to a transportation hearing where they spelled out their needs. And I was like, these needs should have been directly addressed separately. So back to what should be done with the money is it's taxpayer dollars. Minnesotans are overtaxed, clearly. So if that's going to continue to be the case, the money should be given back to taxpayers. I love living here. I'm blessed to live in the state of Minnesota. It's gorgeous here. Taxes are burdensome in this state, and I think that they need to be cut, and I think that the surplus should be given back to people in Minnesota.
Representative Bierman, same question. $7 billion surplus, $2 billion in reserves. What should we do with these dollars?
Well, I still feel that there is time to go back in a special session and address the tax bill from last time so that we could take that off the table. And in a budget year where we're going to be facing immense pressures again, we need to pick up the mantle and go from where we are. But this is an opportunity still after this election and things calm down. There is an opportunity there. But if that does not happen, there's a couple things that we need to do. We need to be utilizing this historic opportunity of a surplus to utilize it for things that Minnesotans need. One of those things is to keep our business strong. One of the fundamental things of business needs is a good education system. And when we have a cross-subsidy, special education cross-subsidy balance due in our school districts, that weighs on the educational opportunities of all our kids in every classroom. And so that's one thing that I think we need to address. And I think we built a lot of support for that last year. That wasn't my bill, but I worked across the aisle. I called out to finance directors around the school districts in Minnesota and spoke to them, and that was their number one thing that they needed to have done. That would strengthen our education system. That's a big thing that we need to focus on. Also, long-term care for elders. I work in a business that I have relations with various facilities around this area, and they are all struggling. It's everything from workforce, PCAs, to the ability to bring senior citizens from, say, hospitals, where some of these facilities have had to close down banks of their units, and we need to address that issue as well. So tax relief certainly is a big part of that. The Social Security tax elimination we talked about, but those are a couple more things that I think are very important.
Thank you. Joe Landru,
Yes, sir.
you already mentioned it, but we're going to go back to it. Tax rates in Minnesota for individuals are the 6th highest in the country. Tax rates for corporations are 2nd in the country and will become number 1 next year when New Jersey removes its corporate tax rate. This is a problem, and sometimes it's good to be number 1, but not in this case. What can be done?
Well, I agree with what you're telling me about how the tax rates are high and burdensome. I know my opponent in the past has voted to raise taxes on small business and to increase legislation, that kind of stuff for small business. It's just the regulations have to come off. My wife and I own a small business, very small business, but we're blessed that we can run it. And when we opened it up, our initial budget was X. When we finished, because of the regulations that we had to go through, our total investment was about another 50% more than what we had planned. So I don't know all of the tax codes in Minnesota. I don't know all the tax codes in the United States, but that's something that I would dive into. My personal thoughts on it is in Minnesota, one of the number one things that we can do right now is to help keep energy costs down, use smart energy policies. If a business is being taxed to death, overtaxed, overburdened, then how in Minnesota can we make sure that they have the resources they need to keep their costs low? Keep the overhead low, find ways to reduce permit times, find ways to get rid of the red tape and bureaucracy, find ways that they're able to produce and able to do their jobs with less burdensome and cheap, affordable energy.
How do we get cheap, affordable energy?
Well, I can think of ways. I know that solar power, wind power isn't it. We're looking at shutting down the Shore Cove plant, which is unacceptable. Coal power, we're buying our power from North Dakota. I don't think Minnesota has even looked at considering opening up a nuclear power plant in the past 10, 15, 20 years. If we go down that route, we'll have cheap, affordable energy for everybody.
Thank you. Okay, you get to ask each other a question. Representative Bierman, you're up.
So as a fellow small business owner, one of the things that I'm hearing on the doors when I go and talk to constituents is the high cost of healthcare and the complexity of the healthcare system in this state. So my question to you, Joe, would be, what would you recommend, or what would be your first point of departure to look at reform at the state level for the healthcare system?
Again, I'm not the most intelligent guy on that, but I would look at free market insurance. Look at options so that individuals and smaller businesses can buy insurance as one maybe purchases car insurance or homeowners insurance. Competition will help keep costs low.
Thank you. Candidate Joe Landru, your question.
First, thank you, sir, for serving in Apple Valley. I might not agree with many of your policies, but I know that it takes a stand to put your name on the ballot and to sit here with these bright lights and people watching us, so thank you for that. A little bit about me, I am a volunteer firefighter in the city. I have been for 20 years, and I continue to serve, so public safety is something that is very near and dear to me. With the riots in 2020 and with emphasis on high crime, I looked at what some of your votes were, and I'm going down the list of how you voted against giving money to law enforcement in April. You voted against stiffer penalties for violent criminals, and it can go down the line. And then I got a beautiful mailer in the mail, which looks great. Your literature is fantastic. And it says, you know, keeping us safe, working with law enforcement. And I'm curious as to how defunding the police, which you voted to do back in 2020, is that supporting the police?
So the constant refrain of Republicans to label Democrats as ones who defund the police is simply a ridiculous charge. You know, I'm not sure which specific votes you're referring to, but they do have sometimes what's called gotcha votes on the House floor. But if you look at my true record, I voted for the public safety bill in 2022, which is, you know, what we need to do. If you're going to support public safety, you do have to vote to fund public safety. And there's a spectrum of public safety initiatives. There is officers, of course, but our public safety bill, 2022 bill, which we passed in the House, would have sent significant funding to local communities across the state of Minnesota, the top 80 communities that were affected by high crime incidents, to support training, to support equipment, to support staffing, to support recruitment, and to support local government needs, working with the communities to make their communities safer. And this is what public safety funding and voting for public safety means. Not only that, but the further significance of working on public safety are things like, you know, housing, affordable healthcare, education, all that.
Well, with that, and I'll finish with this because you gave him a little extra time on the first question. That's the first positive vote that I could find for you with law enforcement because of which way the wind was blowing. So for you to say that Democrats were not leading the charge of defund the police, just Google it, go on YouTube, take a look at whatever you want to take, and there's every one of them that's been doing it. And that's the first vote that you did, and it was an omnibus bill. So with that being said, I can say this, that I will respectfully agree to disagree with you, sir. So thank you.
Your response?
Well, I think that people who look at my full record know that I support public safety. That's one of the top pillars of what government is supposed to be doing. and I do it on a regular basis. I consider every committee that I work in, Health and Human Services, Housing, Education, all of those are short and long-term prevention for public safety. It is a spectrum. I support everything from police to corrections and beyond, and I think we need to look at
Then where were you during the riots to stand up to the governor to say
We're done.
stop?
We're done with that. Thank you. We are now going to give your speech. Why do I get to vote for you? Starting with Joe Landru.
Thank you, sir. I am honored and privileged, like I said, I think, to be up here on this stage. I'm blessed and I'm humbled that I have a lot of folks that are supporting me, knocking on doors and talking to people. I'd like to emphasize that we have a lot more in common than we think we do. I dreaded door knocking at first, but when you talk to some people and you shake some hands, you're like, wow, we're blessed to live where we live. So I want to mention that. I've been on the fire department here for 20 plus years. It's been an honor to serve. I care about where we live. I love the United States of America. I love Minnesota. I love Apple Valley. I'm like you. I'm an average Joe who's paying too much in taxes, who sees crime coming down from Minneapolis and St. Paul, who realizes that the cost of gas is expensive, who realizes that it's a lot of money to put food on your table for your kids, who realizes that our education system is failing us. They're lowering the standards for the ACT scores because the kids can't pass them to get into college these days. So those are the things I'm fighting for. Those are the things that I want to step up and say, hey, I'm with you. In my humble opinion, our elected leaders have forgotten that. There's an elitist attitude in St. Paul. I've never met Governor Walz, but when I hear him talk, it's like he's condescending me and talking down to me, and that's not what our leaders should be doing. They work for us. I will work for District 56A if I'm elected, tirelessly, and I'll give you the best that I got. And so if I can earn your vote today and in the next coming weeks as I'm knocking on your door, thank you very much. That's something to me that I take seriously and I'm honored to do. So that's my speech. Thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you, Joe Landru. Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Scott. And I do want to thank Joe also for standing up and running. There is a glare of the lights here. It is an exhausting job to run for election, and I applaud your work as a firefighter and also stepping up and seeking election. So I've called Apple Valley home for 28 years. My wife and I selected this community, like many people do, for the wonderful school system, which I do not believe is failing us. I think we have a wonderful school system, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to run, to make sure that all children had the opportunity that my children had. My children went through this school system. They thrived. They are doing well, and I applaud the work of the school system. And they've been under tremendous pressure, as all of us have in all of our jobs and in the community, from COVID. And so we need to stand up and support them at this time. So another, lived experience that beyond raising children in this district, another lived experience that equips me to serve in the legislature is operating the family business for over 30 years, meeting payroll week after week. I know the challenges of balancing business needs, workforce demands, and navigating the complex healthcare system. So this high cost of healthcare and the partisan divide in our politics are among the reasons I ran for office in the first place. Division that has risen to the level of harmful obstruction does not deliver to our communities. And I talk about this with people at the door constantly. We need to deliver. I believe we want the same things for our children and our families and our neighbors. And this starts by listening. So I do this by door knocking, including in the off year, and holding coffee hours on a regular basis. I want to hear from you no matter what party you are affiliated with, so that we can build understanding and trust.
That is time.
Thank you very much.
How about a big round of applause for our candidates for 56A, Joe Landru, Representative Robert Bierman.